Warren Buffett disguises himself as a driver to test his employees. What he discovered was shocking. Before we dive into this compelling story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more inspiring content. Warren Buffett stood in front of his mirror, barely recognizing himself. Gone was the familiar business suit and wire-rimmed glasses that had become his trademark. Instead, a man in worn jeans, a faded polo shirt, and a weathered baseball cap stared back at him. The fake mustache felt foreign under his nose, but it completed his transformation into Walter, the new company driver. His personal assistant, Sarah Mitchell, helped adjust the disguise one final time. "Are you sure about this, Mr. Buffett?" She asked, concern evident in her voice. The billionaire investor merely nodded, his eyes twinkling with determination. "Sometimes, Sarah, the best investments we make aren't in stocks or companies, but in understanding people," he replied, straightening his cap. "Today we're going to see what our employees are really made of." The plan was simple yet brilliant. Buffett would spend the day as a company driver, picking up various executives and observing their behavior. Only Sarah knew his true identity, making her the sole keeper of this extraordinary secret. As he walked through the parking lot toward the black SUV that would be his office for the day, Buffett couldn't help but smile. In all his years of making investment decisions worth billions, this might be one of his most valuable experiments yet. Richard Carter's expensive leather shoes clicked against the pavement as he approached the vehicle. Without so much as a glance at his driver, he yanked open the door and slid into the back seat. "Headquarters. And make it quick," he barked, already immersed in his phone. Buffett, maintaining his character, nodded politely and pulled away from the curb. The morning traffic crawled along Omaha's streets, providing ample opportunity for observation. Buffett attempted to engage in casual conversation, asking about the weather and the day ahead. Carter's responses were curt when they came at all, each word dripping with barely concealed disdain. The real surprise came when Lisa Thompson entered, the vehicle for her scheduled pickup. The contrast couldn't have been more striking. She greeted Walter with genuine warmth, asking about his family and how he was finding his new job. "It must be challenging, starting a new position," she said, sympathetically. "I remember my first day here. Everyone deserves a chance to prove themselves, don't you think?" Buffett found himself touched by her sincere interest and kindness. As he drove her to the office, their conversation flowed naturally, covering everything, from local restaurants to the changing seasons in Omaha. What Lisa didn't realize was that her simple act of treating the driver with respect was about to change her life forever. As the day progressed, Buffett continued his charade, ferrying executives to and from various meetings. The spectrum of behavior he witnessed was both enlightening and disheartening. Some, like Lisa, treated him with genuine respect and kindness. Others barely acknowledged his existence, treating the car as if it were self-driving. It was during the late afternoon when Buffett picked up Mark Reynolds, a high-ranking executive responsible for a billion-dollar division of Berkshire Hathaway. As soon as he entered the car, the atmosphere changed. "What is this, a joke?" Mark sneered, looking around the vehicle with disdain. "I expected something more executive for someone of my stature." Buffett, still in character, apologized softly. "I'm sorry, sir. He'll do my best to make your ride comfortable." Mark scoffed. "Right, because that's all people like you are good for, isn't it? Making things comfortable for your betters." The words hit Buffett like a physical blow, but he maintained his composure. As they drove, Mark spent the entire journey on his phone, loudly discussing confidential company matters and even mocking colleagues, including Buffett himself. "Yeah, old man Buffett thinks he's so clever," Mark laughed into his phone. "If he only knew half the stuff we pull right under his nose." Buffett's knuckles turned white as he gripped the steering wheel, his mind racing with the implications of what he was hearing. Chapter 4. The Reckoning. The next morning, Warren Buffett arrived at Berkshire Hathaway headquarters, dressed in his usual attire, a crisp suit, and his signature glasses. The employees who had ridden in his car the day before had no idea of the storm that was about to break. As the weekly staff meeting began, Buffett took the stage. Instead of his usual financial updates, he cleared his throat and began, Yesterday, I conducted an experiment. I spent the day disguised as a company driver, transporting some of our executives around the city. A hush fell over the room. Nervous glances were exchanged, and a few faces notably paled. What I learned was illuminating, Buffett continued. I saw firsthand how some of you treat those you perceive as beneath you. I witnessed kindness and cruelty, respect and disdain. His gaze settled on Mark Reynolds, who was now shifting uncomfortably in his seat. Some of you, Buffett said, his voice stern, seem to believe that your position gives you the right to belittle others, to mock your colleagues behind their backs, to disrespect the very principles this company stands for. Mark tried to interject. Mr. Buffett, I can explain. There's no need, Mark. Buffett cut him off. Your actions have spoken loudly enough. As of this moment, you are no longer employed by Berkshire Hathaway. The room erupted in shocked whispers. Mark, his face ashen, quietly stood and left the room without another word. Buffett wasn't finished. He turned his attention to Lisa Thompson, who looked equally nervous. On the other hand, I also saw examples of true leadership. People who treat everyone, regardless of their perceived status, with genuine kindness and respect. Lisa's eyes widened as she realized he was talking about her. Lisa, Buffett smiled, your compassion and integrity are exactly what we need in leadership positions. I'd like to offer you Mark's now vacant position. The room burst into applause as Lisa, stunned and emotional, accepted the promotion with grace. As the meeting concluded, Buffett left his employees with a final thought. Remember, your true character is revealed in how you treat those who can do nothing for you. At Berkshire Hathaway, that character matters just as much as your financial acumen. The experiment was over, but its impact would be felt for years to come. In the days following Buffett's revelation, the atmosphere at Berkshire Hathaway headquarters was electric. The story of the billionaire's undercover experiment spread like wildfire, not just through the company, but across the business world. Lisa Thompson stepped into her new role with a mix of excitement and trepidation. As she settled into Mark's former office, she found herself overwhelmed by the sudden change in her circumstances. However, she was determined to prove Buffett's faith in her was not misplaced. I never imagined a simple act of kindness could lead to this, she confided to her assistant, James. It's surreal. James smiled warmly. That's the thing about kindness. Lisa, you never know how far it'll reach. Meanwhile, other employees were re-examining their own behavior. Richard Carter, who had brusquely dismissed Buffett during his ride, approached the CEO's office with trepidation. Mr. Buffett, he began, his voice uncharacteristically humble, I owe you an apology. My behavior was inexcusable. Buffett regarded him thoughtfully. Recognition of our mistakes is the first step towards change, Richard. What matters now is how you move forward. As news of the experiment spread, Berkshire Hathaway found itself in the spotlight. Business magazines clamored for interviews, and competitors watched closely to see how this unconventional approach to corporate culture would play out. Weeks turned into months, and the impact of Buffett's experiment continued to resonate throughout the company. Lisa Thompson's division flourished under her leadership, her empathetic approach fostering innovation and loyalty among her team. In a bold move, Buffett implemented a new company-wide policy. Employee evaluations would now include a character assessment alongside traditional performance metrics. The message was clear at Berkshire Hathaway. How you treated people mattered, just as much as how well you performed your job. Not everyone was thrilled with the changes. Some executives grumbled about the new policy, seeing it as unnecessary micromanagement. But Buffett stood firm. During a meeting with his board of directors, he explained his reasoning. Gentlemen, he said, leaning forward in his chair, we're not just in the business of making money. We're in the business of building a legacy, and that legacy is shaped by every interaction, every decision, every moment of kindness or cruelty. The board members nodded thoughtfully. One of them, an older man named Harold, spoke up. Warren, I've known you for decades. This doesn't surprise me one bit. But do you really think it can change an entire corporate culture? Buffett smiled. Harold, I've always believed that culture eats strategy for breakfast. We've just served up a new menu. As the meeting concluded, Buffett gazed out of the window at the Omaha skyline. He thought about Mark Reynolds, wondering where the former executive had ended up. He thought about Lisa Thompson, thriving in her new role. And he thought about all the employees whose names he might never know, but whose daily choices would shape the future of his company. In the end, he mused to himself, "Our greatest investment isn't in stocks or bonds." As the months passed, the effects of Buffett's experiment began to extend far beyond the walls of Berkshire Hathaway. Other companies, intrigued by the success of this unconventional approach, started implementing their own versions of character assessments and undercover boss scenarios. Lisa Thompson found herself unexpectedly thrust into the spotlight. Business magazines clamored for interviews, eager to hear from the woman who had risen from middle management to a top executive position through a simple act of kindness. "I never set out to impress anyone," Lisa explained during one such interview. "I just believe that everyone deserves respect, regardless of their position. It's not about being nice to get ahead, it's about being decent because it's the right thing to do." Meanwhile, Warren Buffett received an unexpected visitor. Mark Reynolds, the executive who had been fired, requested a meeting. Buffett, always curious, agreed. Mark entered the office, a shadow of his former cocky self. "Mr. Buffett," he began, his voice hoarse, "I've spent these past months reflecting on my behavior. I was arrogant, disrespectful, and frankly, a terrible leader. I'm not here to ask for my job back. I just wanted to thank you for the wake-up call." Buffett listened intently, nodding. "And what have you learned, Mark? That true success isn't measured by the size of your paycheck or your office. It's measured by the impact you have on others. I've started volunteering at a local shelter, and, for the first time in years, I feel like I'm doing something worthwhile." As Mark left, Buffett couldn't help but smile. Sometimes the harshest lessons lead to the most profound growth. Just as Berkshire Hathaway seemed to be settling into its new, more empathetic culture, a crisis hit. A major investment went sour, threatening to wipe out billions in company value. The pressure was immense, and old habits began to resurface. Lisa Thompson found herself at the center of the storm. Her division was responsible for damage control, and the stress was palpable. Late one night, as she pored over reports, she snapped at her assistant, James. "Can't you do anything right?" she barked, frustrated by a minor error in a spreadsheet. James looked at her, hurt evident in his eyes. "Lisa, what happened to the person who treated a disguised CEO with kindness?" His words hit her like a bucket of cold water. Lisa sat back, shocked at her own behavior. "James, I'm so sorry. You're absolutely right. This crisis is no excuse for treating you or anyone poorly." She stood up, stretching her tired muscles. "In fact, let's call it a night. We all need rest if we're going to tackle this problem effectively." The next morning, Lisa called a meeting with her team. "I owe you all an apology," she began. "I let the stress of this situation get the better of me, but that's no excuse. We're going to get through this crisis the same way we've achieved our successes, by working together, respecting each other, and remembering that our character matters just as much as our bottom line." Her team, touched by her honesty and recommitment to their shared values, rallied around her. Together, they began to formulate a plan to mitigate the crisis. When Warren Buffett heard about Lisa's moment of self-reflection and course correction, he nodded approvingly. "Now that," he said to his assistant, "is true leadership. It's not about never making mistakes. It's about how you handle them when you do." As Berkshire Hathaway navigated through the crisis, it became clear that the company's new ethos wasn't just a fair-weather philosophy. It was a resilient approach that could withstand even the toughest challenges. As Berkshire Hathaway grappled with the investment crisis, an unlikely ally emerged. Richard Carter, the executive who had initially treated the disguised Buffett with disdain, stepped up in a surprising way. One afternoon, as Lisa Thompson was presenting her team's crisis management plan to the board, Richard raised his hand. "If I may," he began, his tone uncharacteristically humble, "I have some connections in the affected sector that might help us mitigate some of the damage." The room fell silent, all eyes on Richard. He continued, "I've been reaching out to old colleagues, explaining our situation. Many of them remember how Berkshire Hathaway helped their companies during tough times. They're willing to work with us, possibly renegotiating some terms to ease our burden. Lisa was stunned. This was the same Richard who months ago wouldn't even look at a driver. "That's incredibly helpful, Richard, thank you," she managed to say. After the meeting, Richard approached Lisa. "I owe you an apology," he said. "I used to think kindness was a weakness in business, but seeing how you've led during this crisis, how you've inspired loyalty in your team, it's opened my eyes. I want to be part of that kind of leadership." Lisa smiled, extending her hand. "It's never too late to change, Rich." Weeks passed, and the combined efforts of Lisa's team and Richard's connections began to bear fruit. The crisis, while not entirely averted, was significantly less severe than initially feared. Warren Buffett called for a company-wide meeting. As employees filed into the auditorium, there was a mix of anxiety and hope in the air. Buffett took the stage, his familiar, gentle smile in place. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "we've been through a storm. But today I stand before you not to talk about our financial weathering of this crisis, but about something far more valuable." He paused, looking out at the sea of faces. "I've watched this company transform over the past months. I've seen competitors mock our soft approach to business. I've heard whispers that our new policies would be our downfall when real trouble hit." The room was silent, everyone hanging on his words. "But what I've witnessed is nothing short of extraordinary. In our darkest hour, when it would have been easy to fall back on cutthroat tactics and blame shifting, you chose a different path. You chose kindness. You chose respect. You chose to see the humanity in each other." Buffett's voice grew passionate. "And in doing so, you've not only navigated us through this crisis, but have set a new standard for what business can and should be. You've proven that compassion and success are not mutually exclusive, they're interdependent." He gestured to Lisa and Richard, who were seated in the front row. Leaders emerged from unexpected places. People who once saw each other as competitors became allies. And through it all we remembered that the true measure of our success is not just in our profits, but in how we treat each other. As Buffett concluded his speech, the auditorium erupted in applause. Employees hugged, some wiping away tears. There was a palpable sense that they had been part of something truly special. In that moment, Berkshire Hathaway wasn't just a company that had survived a crisis. It was a testament to the power of human kindness in the world of business. In the weeks following Buffett's speech, Berkshire Hathaway's story began to spread beyond the confines of the business world. Media outlets picked up on the tale of the billionaire CEO who went undercover and the subsequent transformation of his company's culture. Lisa Thompson found herself inundated with requests for interviews and speaking engagements. At first she was hesitant, but Buffett encouraged her to share their story. "Your experience can inspire others, Lisa," he said. "Sometimes the most powerful changes start with the simplest actions." One crisp autumn morning, Lisa stood nervously backstage at a TED Talk event. As she was introduced, she took a deep breath and walked out onto the stage. "Good morning," she began, her voice steady despite her nerves. "I'm here to talk to you about an unexpected investment strategy. It doesn't involve stocks, bonds, or market analysis. It's about investing in human decency." As Lisa recounted her experience from her interaction with the disguised Buffett to navigating the company through crisis, the audience was captivated. She concluded her talk with a powerful message: in the end, the greatest return on investment comes not from treating people as means to an end, but as ends in themselves. Kindness, respect, and empathy aren't just nice-to-haves in business. They're essential. They're the foundation upon which truly sustainable success is built. The applause was thunderous. As Lisa left the stage, she realized that their story had the power to change not just their company, but potentially the entire business landscape. Months passed, and Berkshire Hathaway's new approach continued to yield positive results. Employee satisfaction was at an all-time high, and the company's reputation had never been stronger. One afternoon, Warren Buffett's assistant knocked on his office door. "Mr. Buffett, there's someone here to see you. He doesn't have an appointment, but well, I think you might want to meet him." Curious, Buffett agreed. A moment later, a man in his mid-30s entered the office. He looked nervous but determined. "Mr. Buffett," the man began, "my name is Alex Turner. I am Mark Reynolds' son." Buffett's eyebrows raised in surprise. He gestured for Alex to take a seat. "I came here because I wanted to thank you," Alex continued. "When my father lost his job here, it was a wake-up call for our entire family. He was angry at first, but then something changed." Alex's voice cracked slightly with emotion. "He started volunteering at a local shelter like he told you. But it didn't stop there. He's completely transformed. He's present in our lives in a way he never was before. He's kinder, more patient. He was even starting a non-profit to help unemployed executives rebuild their lives through community service." Buffett listened intently, touched by the unexpected turn of events. "Mr. Buffett," Alex said, leaning forward, "your experiment didn't just change your company, it changed our family, and I wanted you to know that." As Alex left, Buffett sat back in his chair, a smile playing on his lips. He thought about the far-reaching consequences of that one day he spent as a driver. The lives changed, the lessons learned, the ripples that continued to spread outward. He picked up his phone and dialed Lisa's number. "Lisa," he said when she answered, "I think we need to make our experiment a regular part of our corporate culture. What do you say we implement an annual Undercover Kindness Week?" Lisa's enthusiastic response was all the confirmation he needed. As he hung up, Buffett couldn't help but chuckle. Who would have thought that one of his most successful ventures would be an investment in kindness? As the years passed, Berkshire Hathaway's Undercover Kindness Week became an annual tradition, eagerly anticipated by employees at all levels. Each year, executives and entry-level staff alike would spend a week in different roles throughout the company, fostering empathy and understanding across all departments. The impact of this initiative spread far beyond Berkshire Hathaway. Other companies, inspired by their success, began implementing similar programs. The business world was slowly but surely shifting towards a more empathetic, human-centered approach. On a warm spring morning, 5 years after the initial experiment, Warren Buffett stood before a crowd at the annual shareholders' meeting. His hair was a little grayer, his steps a little slower, but his eyes still twinkled with the same wisdom and kindness. "When I started this company," he began, "I thought our greatest asset was our financial acumen. I was wrong. Our greatest asset has always been our people, not just their skills, but their hearts." He gestured to the crowd, where Lisa Thompson and Richard Carter sat side by side, now both respected members of the executive team. "We've learned that kindness isn't just a nice addition to business, it is the business. It's the foundation of every successful transaction, every innovative idea, every problem solved, and the returns, they're beyond anything we could have imagined." The crowd listened in rapt attention as Buffett continued, "We're not just building a company, we're building a legacy. A legacy that says you can be successful without sacrificing your humanity. In fact, embracing your humanity and the humanity of others is the surest path to true success." As the meeting concluded, Buffett made an announcement that sent ripples through the business world. He was stepping down as CEO, passing the torch to the next generation. "And I am pleased to announce," he said, his voice filled with pride, "that our new CEO will be Lisa Thompson." The room erupted in applause. Lisa, overcome with emotion, made her way to the stage. "Thank you, Mr. Buffett," she said, her voice steady despite her nerves. "So I promise to continue the legacy you've built, not just of financial success, but of kindness, empathy, and respect for every individual." As Lisa began to outline her vision for the company's future, Buffett watched from the side of the stage, a contented smile on his face. He thought back to that day years ago when he had donned a disguise and set out to test his employees. He could never have imagined the far-reaching consequences of that simple experiment. In the years that followed, under Lisa's leadership, Berkshire Hathaway continued to thrive. The company became known not just for its financial success, but for its commitment to ethical business practices and employee welfare. Warren Buffett, now in retirement, would often reflect on his career. Of all his achievements, he remained most proud of the cultural shift he had initiated. He had proven that in the world of business, kindness wasn't just a virtue, it was a valuable asset. As he watched the sun set over Omaha one evening, Buffett smiled to himself. He had always believed in investing in value, and in the end, he had discovered that the greatest value of all lay in the simple act of treating every person, regardless of their station, with dignity and respect. The experiment that began with a billionaire in disguise had transformed into a movement, changing not just a company, but potentially the very nature of business itself. And that, Buffett mused, was an investment with truly unlimited returns,